Not for me. Not even for Joel. Do it for us.
Fuck the community!
Ellie! Ellie!
What?
There were 6 of them and 2 of us. What do you think would have happened?
You fucking kid! Fuck the community!
If I were out there somewhere, lost and in trouble, you would set the world on fire to save me.
I would.
Fuck the community!
I was really debating on making this video or not. Usually because I like to represent the videos on the channel with a bit of positivity and open-mindedness to whatever the creatives are trying to accomplish. And while positivity is something I do want to represent on most videos, at the end of the day, most of these videos are just so I can share my thoughts and opinions. And unfortunately for The Last of Us, I don't really have the most positive thoughts or opinions on the Season 2 finale, or even Season 2 as a whole. Welcome, fellow Mudbeards, Cordyceps infected, and anyone who finished up with The Last of Us Season 2, because if you haven't, this video is going to be filled with spoilers. I'll go ahead and start with the primary reason I really had a problem with this season, and that is the main protagonist in Ellie. No, this is not because of Bella's performance. I think she's a fine actor, and while maybe not the best actor in the world, I think she has a lot of talent and a lot of potential. No, I think a lot of the problems surrounding Ellie have to do with the writing. And I'm not going to point fingers, as usually there's a lot of hands in the pot when it comes to creative decisions, especially for a show of this scale. That being said, something definitely went wrong here with the intentions they were trying to display when making this show. And no, this is not my Season 2 review, as there is a lot of positive things to say about the season as a whole, but for right now I really just had to get these thoughts off my mind. So, in the show, we are presented with a protagonist in Season 2 that is not only selfish, not only incompetent, but is also very childish. But this isn't just me trying to slander the character, I do have evidence to back these points up. Essentially, why Ellie is selfish is because she was willing to manipulate the entire town of Jackson and as many people as she could to risking their lives to go get revenge for Joel, when she knew herself she didn't care about the community or any of the people there unless they happened to be doing what she wanted. And this is later reiterated when she does clarify in almost a steadfast, bold, righteous nature that the community doesn't matter to her. Now, it's fine to have a character who is more of selfish nature, but if the character is inspired or being adapted from another source material, then it's hard to separate how different these characteristics actually are. See, during this confrontation with Jesse, within the games, Ellie is a little bit more reluctant. You can tell she's not fully confident in her reluctance to help Jesse and Tommy in potential danger. But you can also see that she just isn't really thinking clearly, completely clouded by the idea of finding Abby. This later leads to a sequence where not only does she forget about the guy who was the brother of the person she cared about the most, her community, but someone she should have an attachment to as well, considering it's basically her uncle. And considering that this was the only person she bonded with while she was actually having tensions with Joel. But I guess Tommy isn't considered that community, which then paints Ellie and Joel's relationship as more toxic than it needs to be, considering Tommy was a much more healthy figure in her life. But let's see where this scene actually leads us. Now, if I was Jesse, seeing that I was already extremely mad at Ellie for being such a selfish person, and seeing that at this point she's probably just lost, I would probably just be ready to not talk to her until I'm officially out of Seattle and everyone's safe. But for some reason, Jesse comes to the conclusion that
If I were out there somewhere, lost and in trouble, you would set the world on fire to save me.
I don't know how, considering the recent events that just happened a few hours ago, Jesse could come to this conclusion. But I do firmly believe that Ellie is actually convinced by what she's saying here.
I would.
Which leads to my next point, she's kind of dumb, in other words, incompetent. Now, the writers have specifically painted her out to be incompetent and refer to her as such within their background material. And I can forgive a one-time occurrence of Ellie not knowing her cardinal directions, or Ellie not really navigating that well, or even Ellie not packing very well for the trip in general. We've seen that she likes to wear Converse when boots are more necessary for the certain situations she's found herself in. However, when you keep displaying every moment of this character actually taking initiative as something that leads to a mistake, or something that leads to demonstrating how incompetent she actually is, even in Season 1, she had some training from the federal boarding school she had went to just in regards to how to survive out there in the apocalypse. Not only that, but to tie back to her taking care of her community, when there's a Seraphite that's in danger in the garage, she's fully ready to act and put herself and Jesse in danger. And sure, maybe if you had given her time, she'd eventually come to realize that this would be a mistake, but this kind of impulsive behavior lasts throughout the entire show. Ellie, in the games, while even being frustrated with Dina at points, would never willingly put her in danger, or anybody she kind of cares about. And when it comes to actually neglecting the people she cares about, she doesn't do it with bold confidence, she does it with a little bit of hesitancy. Which leads me to my final point. Ellie in the show is a little bit childish. And I'm not just talking aesthetically. Whatever your preference is there is your own, and it shouldn't indicate the entire show's quality, but what I am going to tackle is some things that I think are a little more palpable. See, Ellie in the show is someone who needs to be taken care of. She's someone who is constantly acting like a child and screaming like a child in multiple scenes. She's a character who, for some reason within the show, they wanted to implement several scenes of her having a childish outburst. But let's go ahead and do another game comparison. Ellie in the games is also completely consumed by the idea for revenge. The only real difference is she doesn't come off as someone who's crossing her arms and expecting this revenge to be handed to her already. She's someone that feels this inevitable pull towards darkness and is slowly getting there. Versus in the show, every sequence we get of Ellie actually talking about Abby, or even especially the scene with Jesse, she's acting like she's upset that things haven't already been solved, that the universe hasn't already corrected this injustice that it's dealt her. Which doesn't paint her as someone who is embracing her dark side, but more as someone who is entitled. Which in season 1, she carried the same sort of characteristics, but she was a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old at the time. It made sense for her to act like this. However, this many years in the future where she's had time to really find herself, especially given that she left her father figure and kind of embraced the community as in Dina and Jesse, you'd think she'd have reached the point of maturity where she had more self-awareness. I'm willing to forgive the idea that she has arrived to Seattle and is kind of having a happy-go-lucky time, because in the games she was a little bit happy as well, and maybe the artists / creatives just wanted to give a different interpretation. And then when we actually had the guitar scene where she had a memory and flashback to Joel, in my head this was the narrative proving that they were thinking about Ellie's behavior ahead of time. But just because you were thinking about it does not mean you displayed it well. See, upon further retrospective, I realized that this really indicates to us that Ellie was just completely neglectful, if not had completely forgotten about Joel or why she was even in Seattle in the first place until that specific moment in the theater. With all the context we've been given, we have no reason to come to any other conclusion. So in my head, yes, she's impulsive, but she's also putting people in danger and not even attempting to grasp the potential threats that they will face out there. And the only way to really validate my point is this final question specifically for the game fans. When you think of Ellie from The Last of Us Part 1 or Part 2, do you think of someone who is selfish? Do you think of someone who is incompetent or even dumb? Do you think of someone who is childish? When I think of Ellie, I don't think of any of these aspects outside of maybe the first game. But I'd love to know your opinions. Considering they're lifting off with this franchise, I think there's just too many ideas at play that they don't really know how to keep in consistency with each other. Primary example of this is the Seraphite side quest. Essentially, Ellie's on her way to the aquarium and goes on a whole side tangent that isn't really necessary or changes the plot in any way, shape, or form, nor does it actually develop her character. Now sure, there could be an argument to be made that she just had her life potentially put in danger and is still going after the aquarium / Abby, fully reminding the audience that she's neglecting the idea of safety and pursuing the idea of revenge. But if that's the message you're trying to send us, then show us her neglecting the safety. Because what was orchestrated to us was her getting on a boat and riding away from an island she was almost killed at that is currently exploding and heading towards what was her original goal in the first place. If you wanted to give us an indication that she had a disregard for her own safety, show a moment where she could have actually been safe. Maybe have a scene where she could essentially walk away, or a scene where she stumbles across another wolf radio and realizes that Tommy is in more danger than she actually thinks. Having her push through an actual moment like this would help send the message across that I think they they were actually trying to set. But again, season 2 does do a lot of things right, and I especially think that the minds behind the music and the set design and production in general really were putting their heart and souls into this project. I think it handled Dina really well, I think it handled Abby really well, and I think it really handled Isaac well. And had the same creatives been put in charge of a Seattle prequel show that mainly showed how Seattle felt to this point, I think they would have knocked it out of the park and set themselves up for whatever sort of Last of Us retelling they wanted to tell. But in regards to the narrative, it feels like it's simply a second draft, when a show of this caliber should probably have at least 5 drafts going into it, I feel. This would really iron out some of these clunky character moments like with your protagonist that we have. Thankfully, I still got hope for season 3 and my guy Tommy. I'm thinking he's gonna be done justice, especially if they start taking in some of the audience feedback for this season. I am someone who will approach the next season optimistically as well, and I'm someone who will save some of my constructive criticisms for the very end of the season. I'm just hoping it's in a season review and not in a rant like this was. But that being said, maybe you disagree with a lot of the points I made here, and I'd love to hear any disagreements down below in a civil discussion. Either way, thank you all for watching. This is very different from my normal type of video, but I'm happy I made it. And remember, if you need your hair tied back eternally, just hit up Ellie from the show, because not even being plunged into the ocean could break that shit. Have a good one, y'all.